Hello and welcome everyone to the City Council study session of March 1st, 2022. May we have a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Mayor Peck,
Present.
Councilmember Hidalgo-Faring,
Here.
Councilmember Martin,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilmember Waters,
Here.
Councilmember Yarbrough.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. These meetings are being held remotely due to the ongoing novel coronavirus pandemic. You can watch the live stream any of these ways. You can go to the Longmont, www.longmontcolorado.gov/agendas. You can also watch it on the city's YouTube channel, Longmont YouTube Live, or via the Longmont Public Media website, longmontpublicmedia.org/watch/. And of course, on Comcast channels 8 or 880. Can we have a Pledge of Allegiance, please? Councilor Yarbrough, would you lead us in that?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
I pledge allegiance
to the
flag.
flag
of the United
States
States of America
And to the
and to the
to
republic
the republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with liberty
with
and
liberty,
justice
justice
for
for all.
Wow.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah. So for the public, anyone wishing to provide public comment must watch the live stream of the meeting and call in only when I open the meeting for public comment. Callers are not able to access the meeting at any other time. You can see on your screen now the call-in information. The toll-free call-in number is 888-788-0099. Watch the live stream and write down the meeting ID when it's displayed at the beginning of the meeting. The ID here is 894-9349-6835. Wait for me to invite callers to call in and then dial the toll-free number, enter the meeting ID, and when asked for your participant ID, press the pound sign. Don't forget to mute the live stream and listen for instructions on the phone. Callers will hear confirmation they've entered the meeting, will be told how many others are already participating in the meeting, and will be placed in a virtual waiting room until admitted into the meeting. Callers will be called upon by the last 3 digits of their phone number and allowed to unmute to provide their comments. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person, and each speaker will be asked to state their name and address for the record prior to proceeding with their comments. Once done speaking, just hang up. So do I have any motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to the next 2 future agendas? Councilwoman Hidalgo-Faring.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have 2.
Okay.
So, while you have me, I'm going to do one at a time. So the first one I want to mention actually came to, I don't know who all received the email, but it said, I did talk to Harold and Don that they did receive not necessarily the email, but maybe a visit. Don, correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody did come in to talk to you about the issue in the campaign, the Fair Campaign Practices Act. And there was a request of changing or adding a word to the our ordinance 2.04208 in adding the word street in address. So when it says including name and address is what the current language says. The request from residents were to add the word street address. So I don't know if you can hear my dogs. I apologize. Give me a moment. Okay. So, I could debate or tell my rationale now or see if I can have it seconded and then we can begin debate.
Yes, go ahead and make the motion. We'll get a second and then discuss it.
Okay, so if I can have a motion, or if someone could second, I'd greatly appreciate it, to share my rationale for bringing this forward.
Counselor Hidalgo Faring, would you mind repeating that motion a little more?
So it was currently in our ordinance 2.0.204 or 7, sorry, under disclosures and reporting. The request was to add all contributions received, include the name and street address of each person who has contributed $50 or more. So the only change would be to add the word street. I can't explain my rationale for supporting this.
That's fine.
Okay,
Let's just wait till the discussion point.
okay.
Do we have a second for that? For that motion? Counselor Yarbrough seconded that. So let's open up the discussion. Counselor
Okay.
Hidalgo Faring, do you want to give us your
Yes.
reason for it?
So, not long ago, in the work I do with my teachers union, we went in and updated our bylaws because these were all pre-written prior to the internet. So a lot of things have changed. So what we imagined, what the world was like back then before, and I believe this was written back in 1992. So prior to the internet, what our phrasing, language, and our often our go-to expressions were predated the internet. So, I think it is imperative that we update our language to match the turn of, 21st century. So
Okay.
being really specific on that. The other thing is, I feel like since this was brought to us by residents, and it was more than one, I felt like as representatives of the community, we should be advocating and, bringing issues forward that were brought to us by the community. So that was another thing a reason why I support this. And then also, I feel like this is a small change that we could make that would really help ensure that we have the trust and confidence of our community members. So I didn't feel like this was a controversial issue, but I felt like it was a small change to make, to one, update us to 21st century language, and two, to really work, representing the community and
Okay.
hoping to open those, just create a line of trust and confidence among our community members.
Sounds good. Thank you. Do I have any other counselors want to discuss this or have an opinion? Counselor Waters.
Could you clarify what it is that you believe is language in the code that how does adding street address bring that into a 21st century setting as opposed to the way it's worded right now?
Mayor, can I
Go-
respond?
Yes.
Okay, so address, typically, when we think of address, we think of where an individual resides, like their street address, their residency. What has happened now is with address, it can be construed as being, it can be thought of as an email address. So that technology piece has changed since 1992.
So just for whatever it's worth, it sounds like what you want to do is take us back, not forward, to require a street address and eliminate the use of an email address, which would be more consistent with a digital age than the street address. Just to clarify the connection between street address and digital age, or the dawn of the internet.
So I kind of think that it adds more clarity of where the donations are coming from. Email address doesn't give a very specific, as what was the intent of this this ordinance, or part of being in the Fair Practice Act was to give whoever's looking through the documents an idea of where these people are from. Where are they even real people? Email address doesn't really get to that. So, and for me, I think it was wanting to be more specific. Are we talking about email address? Or are we talking about, or, the other option would be to include email address, but I really think there needs to be a definite separating of and definition of what address means.
So
Thank you.
I'm going to vote, I'll
Okay.
vote no when the time comes to vote on whether or not to bring this for two reasons. One is I think if we're going to change or update the ordinance, we ought to update the ordinance and not piecemeal it if there's more to update. The second would be, I'm familiar with the background on this, and what I think the motivation is, it eliminates for candidates in the future who accept or used PayPal. Yeah, it eliminates for some the use of PayPal as a way to accept a donation for a campaign. I think that's a mistake, so I'll vote no.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. You're muted, Councillor Martin.
I know I am. It's the evil
Oh,
spar again.
okay.
I think this is too small. And if at some future point we're going to go over the language in essential and update it, then we should do a language scrub. There are all sorts of similar problems, such as a lot of the entities that one pays out of a campaign don't publish a physical address, and you have to use an email because it's all you can get. And the PayPal thing is real, although it's you can get the address. Stop shaking your head, Mayor Pro Tem. It's not that you can't get the addresses, but you have to spend a lot more time chasing down the person because PayPal doesn't require them to provide an address. So we need to decide whether that's going to be sufficient or not. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure that we should do this as a little one-shot deal, but if we're going to do it, we should do the whole thing. So maybe Councilmember Hidalgo Faring would like to give the staff a little more time and amend it to be, an end-to-end scrub as opposed to just a one-word change.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. First of all, I would actually agree that instead of taking it as a piecemeal approach, I would recommend that we do look at the act in its entirety. But as somebody who utilized PayPal in both campaigns, it is not hard to get physical street addresses from folks. It is very easy to do. I required it when asking for PayPal contributions. And also if somebody didn't give it to me, I just turned around and emailed them back saying, I cannot accept your contribution unless you provide me a physical address. And if it's unethical to reject contributions based on the fact that it does not provide you a physical address, then I guess that was unethical. It's not difficult. And for somebody who spends a very large amount of time on social media to say that it's hard to get a physical address from somebody by directly emailing them is ridiculous. So I can agree with saying that we shouldn't take it piecemeal, but for anybody to say it's difficult to get a physical address is just absolutely absurd.
Councillor Hidalgo Faring, do you want to?
Yes, I don't disagree that I do not want to take a piecemeal approach. I just felt like this was one that could be, and Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong. Can we, make this change tonight and then, but also bring back? Or would it just be in everybody's, for the sake of time or for the sake of efficiency, that we asked to bring back the Fair Campaign Practices Act for a review?
Do you want to answer that, Dawn?
Sure, Mayor Peck, Councilmember Hidalgo Faring. There are a couple I have a small list going of a couple changes that I've noted that would be helpful.
Mhm.
So we could certainly I could bring back the ones that I've kept a little list of. It's a small list,
Mhm.
and include this one, and then we could put it on a study session and discuss
Mhm.
before we're in the heat of election season again.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
That's kind of
So,
why I agreed to bring it up now. And I'm sorry for like a conversation format, but that's why I wanted to bring it up now. And this one caught my eye because we are going to be having a special election coming up. And then the following year, another local election. So if we could have these things in order prior to, that's kind of why it caught my eye that maybe we could do something now.
can I make a suggestion, Councillor Hidalgo Ferry? So this is just a motion to put it on a future agenda. Can we amend the motion? Would you be open to amending this motion to include it with the other items that the city clerk has found that she wants on the to be included to change the Fair Campaign Practices Act, and perhaps even meet with the people who are working on this, so that we are including the public that is interested. They're the ones that brought it to you, so it would be good to have a conversation with them too. Do we want a date certain that we would like to see this? We want to just say before the next election. You decide, Councillor Hidalgo Ferry, how you would like to word that.
So I don't want to put a definitive date.
Okay.
Because I know, there's a lot of things going on and some
Okay.
things have to kind of take precedence over others as situations come up. So I do want to allow for that flexibility.
Okay.
Definitely before the next regular election cycle, if we cannot make it by this special election, understood. But
Okay.
if we can have something codified before the next, and really it's not, the decision now is for us to be able to discuss this in depth as we look at the language and look at implications. So my
That would
intent
be-
is not to really have that debate tonight, but to get it on an agenda where we can have a thorough conversation on this topic.
So if I understand you correctly, then you want to amend your motion to
Mhm.
put this on a future agenda, including the items that the city clerk has found that she would like to put up for amendment as well in the Fair Campaign Practices Act. Do I have that?
Yes,
Kathleen,
you do.
Did that
Yes.
make sense to you, Don? Okay. Councillor Yarbrough, would you like to second the amended motion? All right. It's been seconded, discussed, and amended. Let's all vote. Those who would like to see this on a future agenda, raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Hidalgo Faring, but you said you had 2 items.
I do. And the next one, I didn't know if when the city manager does the COVID update, if I would be able to bring it up then. So I'm bringing it up now. We had talked about our back when Councilmember Martin had mentioned about keeping virtual for the next couple of weeks. Well, so it's been a couple of weeks, and I'd like to make a motion that we move back to in-person. And I can explain my reasoning behind that if I can get a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So my rationale for bringing this forward is the changes in guidance from CDC, the state, and Boulder County that we can go maskless. I know some of the issues was to be in a meeting for several hours with the mask on was very challenging for folks. We have the vaccine, we have the booster. I understand we are still at a high transmission rate. We're still above that red line. However, from my own personal experience, I've been in the classroom this entire pandemic. We've recently moved our staff meetings from virtual to in person. So, and, knock on wood, I haven't gotten sick, But it seems like we know more about the virus and we have some more mitigating practices in place that I think it's time for us to move back.
Okay,
Plus I mean, this is hard. My dogs, my husband, it was like, I need to be back in person. I need to focus.
thank you. Is there any other discussion on this? Harold, do you want to weigh in on that, please?
Yeah, if since we don't have a COVID update, I can show you a couple of graphs really quick.
Okay,
So this one is the wastewater work that we're doing, and you can see that we're now pretty low, and that work continues to decrease from a wastewater perspective. And then I'm going to share another screen with you all. And then this one is the caseload. So you can see that we're getting pretty close to the red line. And then I got an email from the county that said their numbers are continuing. I mean, the numbers are just continuing to decrease. So that was really the only thing I was going to say in city manager remarks. If I may make a suggestion, if we look at the 29th as the day that we're going to come back, because we have a meeting next week, and that's not a lot of time to communicate to the community that we're going to be back, but then that gives us time to get everything shifted over on the 29th, if council's open to that idea.
Councilor Hidalgo Faring, this is your motion. So would you like
So,
to?
yeah, so I would like to add that date on my motion that we return to in person starting effective Tuesday, March 29th.
I'll second that amendment. So motion's been made by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. I seconded it. Do we have any comments by other councilors before we vote? Seeing none. Oh, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
I would just like to make sure that all council members are comfortable with a maskless meeting for both council members as well as the public, since we are going back into a public meeting. If everyone's comfortable with that, then absolutely. Otherwise, I'm willing to also require masking for our meetings if that would be more comfortable for council members in the near term.
Do any of the councilors want to have any comments about that suggestion, masked or unmasked? Hidalgo Faring?
Can I offer the suggestion? So currently, as I'm teaching, I still wear a mask. The majority of my kids, their parents want them to still be masked. So out of respect for them, I continue to wear my mask. So I think to have that option would be very beneficial, and kind of seeing if there are council members who still want to wear masks, I'll be happy to wear mine. I have no problem.
So does the amendment include voluntary masks then? Would that sound like a?
I would think so. I mean, my goal was just since early on, we said that we would be following CDC and Boulder County Public Health guidelines, and it is optional. So.
And the reason I mentioned the word voluntary is because if we are going to the public to announce what we're going to do, we would have to have the correct wording in there so they know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I would say voluntary. Because,
okay, so the
I
motion
do not want to put that on the staff to help mitigate those things.
So the motion is that we go back to in-person meetings on March 29th with a voluntary masking addition to the meetings. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Harold, for that update. Are there any other motions to add agenda items to future agendas? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move on. Now we are going to have the public invited to be heard. with three, remember public that in the public that it's a 3-minute limitation on your comments. So it's time to call in now. The information's on the screen. Please mute your live stream and dial in now. We're going to take a 5-minute break to give everyone time to call in. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Mayor Peck, we are approaching the 5-minute mark. I do see we have a caller waiting, but I'll leave it open for a couple more seconds for the rest of council to return.
Thank you, Dallas.
Okay, I'm going to drop the slide and still only the one caller.
Okay, let's bring them in.
Sounds good. Caller with the last 3 digits 525. Caller 525, would you please hit *6 to unmute yourself? And when you speak, please make sure that you have the live stream muted and state your name and address for the record. Hey there, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. It's Brian Johnson of 926 Kaufman. I'm called in this evening with a request. There was an issue that myself and another gentleman who I didn't know, we brought up at the last public invited to be heard. That was the issue of car stereo noise, particularly along Main Street at certain hours. With spring approaching, that's when it gets bad. Summertime, you know, with the inclement weather, we've had some relief, but you know, even yesterday afternoon, it was bad. I between noon and 1:30, I counted 67 instances of audible car stereos inside my house, and I'm 150 feet off of me. I'm a block over. For those that reside along Main, it's a constant and frequent nuisance. You know, the city ordinance 10.20.100 allows for 25 feet. While that's unenforceable, I understand. I think we can do something about the ones that are audible from 100, 200, even 400 feet. Rattle your windows, and at certain times, particularly weekends, holidays, nice weather, it can go on for 16 hours a day. About every stoplight cycle, you have at least one. I've spoken with Jeff Sater, the block captains. I've actually put a lot of effort into this. You know, I understand the challenges that they face. Obviously, limited police resources, and the fact that it's difficult to identify violators from inside a vehicle. From outside, it's plainly audible, but a lot of engineering goes into cabin quietness in vehicles, and it's tough for them to identify them from the vehicle. And so that's why I'm coming to you guys to ask for some help. They need our help. Citizens, those of us that live near any major thoroughfare, but particularly Main Street, need your help. And there's a couple of simple, cheap policy options I want to throw out there. Maybe a chance that we could get signs hung below the existing no cruising signs that are already on Main that read car stereo noise ordinance strongly enforced, or something to that matter. Secondly, we maybe put out a press release that says we're going to start enforcing this more. Even better, maybe we could step it up and increase fines a little bit. Perhaps make downtown a quiet zone where fines are doubled. You know, we put a lot of money. We put $300,000 into those patios on Main Street a few months ago. And it makes it really unpleasant to dine on any patio, particularly ones that are on Main Street, when you have those going by. And turns out that the prime violation time for car stereos is kind of the prime dining times. It's Friday evenings into Friday night, Saturday afternoons to Saturday evenings,
Brian,
and Sunday afternoons, for whatever reason, are a bad time. So
Brian,
can we bring this to the table? And
Brian. Thank you very much for your comments. You've made some great points. So thanks, your time is up. Thank you very much.
And with that, there are no other callers, Mayor Peck.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to our special reports and presentations. We have 2 presentations tonight. They're actually our study session items. The first one is a proposed restructuring of Public Safety Department. And I do think our city manager, Harold Dominguez, is going to take us through that.
Yes, well, I'm going to introduce Zach Artis on this one
Okay.
to do it, but Before I wanted to do this, I know you're probably going, what's a restructuring doing on this agenda item? Because that's normally an operational piece that we deal with internally as the charter outlines. The reason we're bringing this to you is that in order to do the restructuring, there is a funding component that goes along with this, and it's tied to the funding that we allocated when we were looking at the FPPA, the retirement switchover within police and fire. And when Jim Golden brought that to you all as part of the collective bargaining agreement, we indicated that we were funding it to the tune of approximately $1 million, and that we didn't think we weren't sure we were going to need all of that. So the funding source that we're utilizing in order to do the restructuring that you saw in the council comm is actually a use of those dollars. And because when we talked to council that we programmed them here and we want to move them, we actually wanted to bring that so that council could tell us whether they were okay with the use of that funding. And so I've asked Zach to talk a little bit about what he saw, what he's looking at, what we're trying to accomplish, so that you all can understand the use of the dollars. And that's really the question on this, is the use of the dollars.
Dallas, if you could bring up the PowerPoint for me, please, sir. All right. Good evening, Mayor Peck and City Council members. Zach Artis, Public Safety Chief for the City of Longmont. I'm joined tonight by Commander James Brown. He will be presenting some information towards the end of this presentation. But tonight we wanted to bring before Council a proposed restructuring plan for public safety, but specifically for police service side of things. Dallas, if you'll go to the next slide for me. Our goal is that the proposed changes, along with in conjunction with some other operational improvements, will help to address some organizational needs and challenges that we've identified in our police services. Dallas, if you could go to the next slide. And so when we talk about organizational challenges, the areas where we have the most need is our patrol division. For our frontline supervisors in particular, when we talk about our sergeants, who are first line supervisors, they have many additional responsibilities other than simply just managing and supervising their shifts. As you can see, they have some operational responsibilities. They have administrative responsibilities. They have handled significant events and major investigations that occur on their watches, along with program coordination and collateral assignments. Dallas, next slide for me, please. So what we found is when we began to look at, we found that our patrol sergeants spend on average about 60% of their time working on administrative paperwork and collateral assignments, meaning 60% of their time is spent within the office. It only gives about 40% of the time to be able to be out on the road, supervising and working along with their shifts. And so some of the collateral assignments that we're talking about here, we have everything from K9, to honor guard, to vehicle maintenance, FTO programs, animal control, our CSOs, which is our community service officers, community volunteer patrol, sergeant's apprentice programs, and again, they operate as instructors for a variety of perishable skills or skills that we have to do every year for training. That's just to name a few of the things that they have to do. And this leads to challenges within an organization, and in our organization, it's led to some challenges. And first and foremost, the communication. Again, we're not able to establish clear objectives and directions. And employee development. Again, how do we identify strengths and weaknesses of our employees to begin to help develop them, almost like a mentorship program, being able to find out what their goals, what they want to achieve in public safety and where they're hoping to get to. Again, organizational efficiency is affected by this. Again, we talked about supervising. If they're spending 60% of the time in the office handling administrative and other assignments, then they're only spending a very small amount of time out on the road along with their staff. And then again, are we creating this culture of consistency, accountability, and productivity? Next slide, please, Dallas. So when we look at really our tenure of a patrol officer, as you know, many of you already know, when you start in law enforcement, you start on the road. You go into the uniform, you're the one driving the marked car, you're answering calls for service with 911. But when we look at what we have as far as experience coming in, What we find is that we're allowed at 86 officers on our uniform patrol division, but 27% of them are still within their first year, meaning they have less than 12 months on the road. And then what we find is that 47% of the patrol officers have less than 2 years with the department. And so that's a pretty high number of what we have as far as experience. And so what you see on the right-hand side is a graph that shows really when we look at collectively or globally all of police side of things, you can see that for the most part, 68% of all of our folks have less than 5 years in law enforcement. And then we have 15% have 10 years or more, and then 5 to 10 years is about 17%. I will tell you that when I started here in August of last year, we had 30 openings, and I think we're down to about 7 this year. So we've seen quite an influx with 30 officers into that 86 because they're starting on our patrol. So there's a great need for our line level supervisors to be available and to be on the road. Dallas, if you go to slide 6 for me, or the next one. So we also wanted to look at what it looked like for our sergeants' tenure. What are we looking like as far as our sergeants across the board? And so what you can see from a department standpoint, we're almost 50-50, meaning that we have 50% has been here less than 3 years or been a supervisor less than 3 years. And then we have those that have been about 50% has been more than 3 years. But when you look at our patrol, because when you make sergeant, that's where you start. Here just recently in the past month, we promoted 5 officers to sergeant. And so what you find is that we have about 17% that have 3 years or more as a sergeant. And then we have about 83% that has less than 3 years. Dallas, if you go to the next slide for me. So the proposal and organizational changes that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight as we go through some slides is what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to promote the deputy chief to a police chief position. We want to add 3 assistant police chiefs, 3 commanders, and 13 sergeants is what we currently have. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like from an organizational standpoint and why we would like to move towards this reorganization. Dallas, if you'll go to the next slide for me. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we looked across the board at other cities comparable to population size and also with staffing levels to make sure that what we were trying to do and what we were looking to do was consistent with what we're seeing across public safety, particularly on the police side. And so we looked at cities, Arvada, Boulder, Greeley, Loveland, and Westminster that are typically close to our size, along with staffing. And as you can see, universally across the board, each one of those agencies have a police chief. Right now, we have a deputy chief that oversees our police department. What you saw as far as assistant chiefs, also known as deputy chiefs, on average, the department has about 2.5 of those individuals. We have 1. When you get to commander, that commander position can be titled a couple of different ways. It can be titled lieutenant or captain. What you find is that for Longmont, we have 4. Most agencies are averaging 7. And when you look at sergeants and officers, we're pretty consistent with what we see across cities that are comparable to our agency and our sizes. Dallas, if you go to the next slide for me. So when I started in August of last year, this is the organizational chart that we had. This is the structure that we had. Of course, you have public safety chief. You had a deputy of fire services, the deputy chief of police services, the deputy chief of support services, and then you had a community health and resilience director. And you can see the number of total personnel that each one of those are assigned. So that's kind of more of a global look at what public safety looks from a 30,000-foot view. But Dallas, go to the next slide for me. And so what we look here and what we see is this is in August of last year. This is the police service side of things and how things were structured. So you would have a deputy chief over police, and he has 4 commanders, 2 over patrol, 1 over investigation or detectives, and 1 over special operations. And again, you can see the breakdown of span of control there. So Dallas, if you'll go to the next slide for me. And so this is what we are proposing. This is what we would like to try to move to. And what is in orange is the highlighted changes. And these really are only changes in titles, not changes in responsibility or changes in monetary changes, simply because they're already compensated and they're already doing the functions as these positions. So the recommendation and what we're proposing is that the deputy chief of fire would become a fire chief. The deputy chief of police would become a police chief. And then our support services deputy chief would become assistant public safety chief. And again, you can see the personnel that are assigned to that. The items that are in blue are individuals or groups that report directly to me. We have PSU sergeant. We have our data and marketing. Then we have our neighborhood response team. There's 2 officers that are involved in that. And then when you see LECC, that is the comms or the 911 center that reports to me. So Dallas, the next slide for me, please, sir. And so in the orange, this is what we are proposing and we're requesting that we would like to do. And so what you see is you see the 3 assistant chiefs. There would be assistant chief over patrol, 1 over investigations, and 1 over collaborative services that would include community health and resilience, along with other units such as school resource officers, K9, traffic, animal control, that don't necessarily fit under patrol or investigations. And so what you would see is the responsibility of the commanders that we currently have. Those would move up because they're more of an executive leadership. They're kind of big picture working on things as we move through. The 3 commanders that we have highlighted in orange there are more of a role of middle management. A lot of agencies use what we call lieutenants or captains to help with that middle management. And their responsibilities and assignment would basically take all of the administrative and collaborative responsibility off of the sergeants in order for those 13 sergeants to get back on the road and be spending anywhere between 95 to 96% of their time on the road with their shifts. Again, the commander position, there would be 1 assigned to day shift, 1 assigned to swing shift, and 1 assigned to nights. And that would help. And again, those 13 sergeants, they all work different shifts. They either work days, swings, or nights, would be divided among those 3 commanders to help with that. And so having lieutenants or the commander roles isn't really something new for the Longmont Public Safety or that commander lieutenant position. These positions have been in police services before years ago and have been done away with by previous administrations for a variety of reasons. And again, we still see that on the fire side of public safety, we have lieutenants and captains on the fire side, along with assistant chiefs. But I think this really builds into really a bigger vision of public safety, and that is succession planning and developing our employees. You know, we talked just a few minutes ago on one of the slides that we looked at about 47% of our officers had less than 2 years on the road or 2 years at the agency. And then we looked at about 83% of our patrol sergeants had less than 3 years. And so I'm a big believer that in order to have a successful succession plan, we have to create a culture that embraces and provides opportunities for our talented men and women that work for the Longmont Public Safety, for them to develop and to grow. And so that is the goal, is again to help with not only management and supervision, to getting folks back on the road, but also to build towards succession planning and development within public safety. Dallas, if you'll go to the next slide for me. So our desired outcomes is simply we have to improve. It would be improved communication. Again, we talked about employee development, meaning that we're finding out what their strengths, what their weaknesses are, how we begin to develop the next generation of officer that is coming in to take those leadership roles in the future. Again, it helps to improve organizational efficiency as far as what we're getting done. Again, improve supervision because we're putting those sergeants back on the road to be able to work hand in hand with their folks. Again, it creates a culture of accountability, consistency, and productivity. Goes along with some of the other bigger projects that we're working on in public safety, particularly on the police side with updating our policy and then moving towards certifications. Again, improves the span of control. And again, reduces risk and liability and identifies problems and patterns, meaning early on, we're able to identify behaviors or actions or issues within our community that we can get on top of before it becomes a major issue. And again, lastly, more presence in community problem solving, which is critical to have that relationship between public safety and the community. Dallas, next slide for me. And so the question is, as Harold touched on a little bit, is the financial impact and funding for what we're trying to do on the police side. And I know Harold touched on a little bit, but I want to afford Commander Brown an opportunity to just talk a little bit about the funding, what that looks like, and how that will carry through not only this year, but for the years to come. And so once he is done, be more than happy to take any questions, concerns, or comments the council may have regarding these suggestions or these changes.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Let me get rid of that feedback. Okay, thank you, Chief. And as already has been mentioned, City Manager Dominguez has already kind of covered the funding source. So I just wanted to break down a little bit more detail as to what the actual financial impact of this proposal would be. The net financial impact would be an increase in ongoing funds of $275,415. And that does include the addition of one full-time position. The way that we are making up the rest of the funding or to get to that net number is we are taking one of our current commander positions, and that would be converted into one of the assistant chief positions. And then we take one of our existing master police officer positions and convert one of those to that assistant chief position. The remainder of what's left after converting those positions is the ongoing funds that I spoke about. And again, the fund source from those been identified as the fund that City Manager Dominguez already spoke about, which was the budgets that were created for the conversion to the Fire and Police Pension Association plan. So that covers most of the funding. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Chief Artis in case there's any questions.
Would you mind taking down the slide, Dallas? Thank you. Do you have any questions, counselors, for Chief Artis? Counselor Waters.
I just want to confirm my understanding of the numbers. The $271,000, $271,395. That's money that would have gone into the FPP retirement program.
Let me kind of explain that. We budgeted because we didn't know how many people were going to move in that entire process. And we've gone through that move, and this is what's remaining after that.
So that's money that's on the table, unallocated, that is what would be used to cover the $275,415. So there's obviously $4,000 in change there, but basically the additional cost for the staffing scheme or plan that Zach has laid out, the net of all that is basically a $4,000 additional expense between the 275 and the 271 in terms of new dollars. Is that accurate?
I'm looking at Jim and
Harold, I'm just looking at the council communications and the net ongoing cost as I looked at because you look on whatever page that is,
Yeah.
and it gets to the, what the cost is for additional staffing in the roles and responsibilities, and then the conversion of the master police officer position and one commander position. The net of that looks to me like is a cost of $275,415, which is what Commander Brown shared. And then the slide I was looking at was the FPP total, and I'm just assuming that's a pot of money that's used to cover that additional expense.
So James, I'm going to ask James, because that 275 is his number, but he might be able to answer that easier. James Brown.
Sure. Let me get in there and take a look. So I think I see where the confusion is coming from, and I will apologize for creating that confusion. The net ongoing cost of $275,415, all of that would be covered by the funds that are available in the contingency budgets we're talking about from FPPA. The number that's on the slide, there was a mix up there. That number that's on the slide should reflect that 275,415. So there's no excess funding that hasn't been accounted for. So that full balance of the 275,415 would come out of those budget funds we're talking about.
Yeah, that's kind of what I assumed. I wasn't fiddling over the difference of the 275 and the 271. Just understanding that as those costs roll, as with the reallocation, as the costs roll up to the staffing plan, the money to cover those costs is available through what was budgeted for the FPP retirement program no longer needed for the FPP.
Yes,
That's
sir,
all.
that's correct.
Yeah, that's, I'm good. That's all I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
If I can I want to reiterate a couple of points Zach made. So to be very clear, when he shared the slide on the deputy chief and the deputy fire chief and the title of police chief and fire chief, that changes nothing financially. That changes nothing from a responsibility side. It is really to bring clarity to roles and responsibilities and what people have to do, because I know when we went through the hiring process, they kept referring to the public safety chief as police chief. He's over every public safety chief. And if council remembers, I said that's more of an assistant city manager in public safety in terms of reviewing the entire body of work in the entire public safety department. There's some things that Zach has also done in this, and one of the conversations that we've really had is about connecting the organization. And so he's also moved a couple of, and I don't know, he may have mentioned it, but I want to talk about this a little bit with council. He's moved Sarah Arney and David Kennedy to where they're reporting directly with him. And so they're really working these cross-organizational issues. So you've seen them on the neighborhood impact team. They've added to the neighborhood impact team what we're working on some parking issues. But that's for two purposes. Build stronger connections in the community, build stronger connections within the organization and how we work collectively as an organization with each other. And I will say as we're using this now, it's been really beneficial. Also want to say a couple of things of why I approve this in this is because one of the things we looked at lieutenants, we looked at some of these other issues, and we were creating compression issues. It was really hard to make it work financially. I will tell you during my month-and-a-half stint as the interim public safety chief and what I saw, and I didn't talk to Zach about this, but we saw similar things, and it really is about that layer of supervision, increasing the number of people that we're putting on the streets to support the officers that are there, have that direct supervision, and really not have folks in the office 60% of the time doing office work, and really aligning this in a different way. And so his analysis, I wanted to see what he was going to tell me based on what I saw, and it lined up exactly with what I was seeing during this interim period. And so I think it's what we need to do as an organization. I think it's what we need to do to support our community, our public safety staff members, build the succession planning, bring accountability in, and just, I think it's going to really take us, again, we talk about how do we take the next step, and I think this is a big part of it. So I wanted you to hear that from me.
So I want to say I am really excited about the way that you're reorganizing this, Chief Argus. But I also like the idea of putting Sarah and David in the roles that you have had. They're well known in the community and through many organizations. And I do think that the residents have confidence in those two. So putting them more in the public eye is a good idea. So thank you for that. So excited to see where this goes. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, council members.
So did you need direction from us?
I will need a motion to allow us to use the funds, the funds remaining from that were budgeted in the retirement account.
Great. And I see Councilor Waters had your hand up.
I was just gonna, I thought we did need to move to give them direction. So I'll move that we approve the use of the unexpended money for the FPP program and reallocate that $275,415 to cover the cost of the reorganization of the public safety department.
Thank you. Do I have, okay, and that was moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is also under the study session items. It's the 2022 legislative bills recommended for city council position. And this comes from Assistant City Manager Sandy Cedar.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Members of council, this is Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, and I have two bills for your consideration today. The first bill is House Bill 22-1138, which is concerning the creation of programs to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicle commuter trips by improving access to alternative transportation options. So you may remember last year there was a bill very similar to this that required businesses to require their employees to either find alternative transportation or reduce vehicle miles. This is the voluntary version of that bill. And so what it does is it gives incentives for businesses to really get people either on alternative transportation routes or helping them to work from home or whatever that may look like in order to reduce pollution and vehicle miles traveled. So since this really does align with the council's sustainability plan, the staff recommends that City Council support House Bill 22-1138.
So do you want to move, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez? Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. As the representative for the city for the Colorado Municipal League Policy Committee, I just want to make sure that everybody knows it was, I believe, 2 weeks ago now, or 1.5 weeks ago. We had this meeting where all the representatives from around the state voted on the CML policy position on these. And this was probably the most controversial of the votes that was taken that afternoon or that morning/afternoon. It was about 4 or 5 hours of votes. So it was a while. But so there was a constituency of, I would say, kind of Metro Denver / Boulder County council members and representatives that wanted to support this. That was voted down. The CML Policy Committee decided to oppose unless amended, or be neutral unless amended. I can't remember exactly. It was unless amended because as large employers, the city, just like Longmont and other cities, were concerned that this would be an unfunded mandate, and that kind of goes against CML's policy committee's general, litmus test on how they look at these bills. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that. The mayor of Louisville, Ashley Stoltzman, was for it, argued for it. The council member from Boulder argued for it. It was generally places like Parker that argued against it. And Brighton argued against it. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of what happened in that CML policy meeting concerning this item.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Martin.
Two things. One, I would like to point out that this is supportive, if not entirely consistent, of the direction that our incipient connectivity for local transit collective impact committee is trying to head. Hasn't gotten very far yet. And second, I'm not certain how a voluntary program can be an unfunded mandate.
Any other comments?
I will just say that I voted with the other Boulder County municipalities, which, like I said, died. And so then the opposite vote prevailed. I think Mayor Ashley Stoltzman from Louisville provided really good arguments why it wasn't necessarily an unfunded mandate. I can understand some nuances where some of the other municipalities thought that, but I support the staff's recommendation. So I'll make that clear.
So I'll chime in here. I agree. I don't understand the unfunded mandate when it is a tax credit. I understand the outlying municipalities like Parker who are having a really difficult time with transportation to begin with. And the remote areas. The urban areas like Denver, and we are becoming more urban, and Boulder have many transportation options for people if they don't drive. So I can understand the argument for it. The last time this came up, when it was mandated, I was very sorry to see that leave. Because sometimes you have to push people to do something. They don't transition easily. I'm going to support this because if nothing else, we need to start somewhere. And if it's voluntary, then it will at least help people look for other means of transportation. So I will be voting for it. Do we have any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of supporting this bill, please raise your hand. This ordinance bill, I guess it is. Great. All those opposed? So Sandy, that passes unanimously. We will support that one.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. The second bill that I have for you today is House Bill 221151, and this is concerning measures to incentivize water-wise landscapes and creating a state program to finance voluntary replacement of irrigated turf. So obviously, one of the things that will assist us in saving water is changing landscapes. We have xeriscape programs and other things through our water master plan. Currently, our water master plan does not include turf replacement or incentives for turf replacement. However, if the state does end up moving forward with some grant programs, it certainly seems like something that our residents could take advantage of, would certainly save water. It is something that we're proposing in our parks right now. And so based on all of those reasons, plus the alliance with your sustainability plan, the staff recommends the City Council support House Bill 221151.
Great. Any discussion? Councilor Martin?
Yes, I would like to add to this that the Resource Central organization that gives us Garden in a Box and stuff like that, and our sprinkler system calibration program also offers turf replacement, which City of Longmont does not subsidize at present. This might help us fix that problem. And I have had a number of constituent requests saying, why can't I use turf replacement from Resource Central? And so I'm going to support it because my constituents are asking me to.
Okay, anyone else have any comments? All right, I've had the same emails, same telephone calls, so our city wants to go that way. So great. All those in favor of supporting this bill, please raise your hand. Those opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Good bills. So now we're here at the mayor and council comments. Do we have any comments from our councilors? Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I just want to publicly thank Longmont's Sunshine Club, a volunteer nonprofit group of very active women in town, for their work with the St. Vrain Valley School District principals in a number of St. Vrain Valley schools, elementary schools, and probably more specifically their health clerks. The Sunshine Club does an extraordinary job of coordinating with Salud and volunteer dentists in town to conduct dental screenings in our elementary schools. And then the folks from Salud set up opportunities for teeth cleaning, dental hygiene, and more serious work if kids need it. And all that comes from volunteer dentists in town who volunteer. And that work just goes on. And I've just seen it in the last week, literally hundreds of phone calls to parents and health clerks working to make certain that kids get the attention they need, and all of the paperwork and logistics behind that. Pretty remarkable. So I don't know how many thanks they get, but we owe them a big thanks on behalf of kids who need the very best of us. And that's what this group is doing. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you for bringing that up, Councilor Waters. Are there any other comments? I would just like to share that James Eamon from the Stewart Foundation, the foundation that built our incredible museum, is giving the Friends of the Library, a rather large donation to buy in 2023, 100 books for every 4-year-old in Longmont. So every 4-year-old is going to get 100 books, both in English and Spanish, because they totally believe in education, which is why they love our museum and we keep having educational programs there. And that just makes my heart glad, because if we don't keep those kids reading, and we will all pay for that in the end. So thank you to the Stewart Foundation. The other thing I want to say is that we are moving forward with the counselors reading. It's going to be the counselors reading club, book club now for a while, see how that works. I want to thank Olga Bermudez, who is setting that up. So we'll all be hearing from her and as she schedules that out for the rest of the year. So that'll be very exciting. That's all I have. Do we have any comments from our city manager?
Yes, Mayor, Council, I just wanted to direct your attention to your email. During the last council meeting, council directed staff to send a letter to COGCC, or to draft a letter to COGCC. Jane Turner has sent that letter to you all for you to see. And then we'll be working to get that out to them, I think tomorrow, if they haven't already. But I just wanted to direct your attention to that email from Jane.
Thank you. And I want to thank Jane. The detail that she put in that email from our air quality monitoring was great, from all the data that she's been gathering for almost 2 years. So I want to thank her for that. Do we have any comments from our city attorney? Eugene?
No comments, Mayor.
Thank you, Eugene. So that is the end of our meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn? I move to adjourn this meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Thank you. That carries. Our meeting's adjourned, but we're going to use this same Zoom link to log into the Longmont Housing Authority meeting. So let's take a 5-minute break. Or do you want to move right into it, Harold?
We onboarded everyone. I think everyone's already on it. So if council wants to move forward, we can. If you want to take a break, we can take a break. It's council's.
Let's just take a short break. We've been talking for a bit. So let's take a 5-minute break and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Mayor and council, I do have about 30 seconds left before we hit that 5-minute mark.
Thank you, Dallas. If everybody come back on screen, we'll get our meeting started. Okay, we're waiting for Councilor Waters and then we'll be ready to go. There he is. Okay, welcome back to the Longmont Housing Authority Board of Commissioners regular meeting today, Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. These meetings are being held virtually due to the pandemic. Let's see, do we have, there she is. Dawn, would you mind doing roll call?
Absolutely. Chairperson Peck,
Present.
and then Commissioner Hidalgo Faring,
Present.
Commissioner Waters,
I'm here.
Commissioner Yarborough,
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Here.
Commissioner Martin,
Here.
Chairperson Peck, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any agenda revisions and submissions of documents? Do
No,
we have anything?
back.
Pardon me, Harold?
We don't.
Nothing? Okay. We have a public invited to be heard. Can we, Dallas, would you mind displaying the call-in screen for us? So the, I'm a little hesitating here because it says we were going to take a 5-minute break, but we just took a 5-minute break. So Dallas, is there any way that we can keep this screen up and keep the meeting going and you can admit people to the waiting room at the same time?
Yeah, so I can leave this up, and if you are looking to see your other council members by the window that you have open, it should give you a couple options, and show grid video would be your best bet to see each other. But I will start a timer.
Okay, I see all of us. So for the public, you can dial in now for public invited to be heard. The dial toll-free number is 1-888-788-0099. Please mute the live stream, and when asked, put in the meeting ID of 894-9349-6835. When you're called upon, press star. The pound sign. Thank you. So we'll continue while you issue them into the waiting room, Dallas. Thank you for that. For old and new business, we need to review the proposed Longmont Housing Authority 2022-2026 goals. I would like to invite Karen Roney on the screen to provide this report. Karen, I can't see you, so I'm assuming you're there.
Yes, Chair Peck, I can see you. So I don't know, Harold, did you want to make any initial comments on the goals?
Right now I'm having technical difficulties, so
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you. And because we did have a couple of commissioners that were unable to be with us when we had our commission meeting on the last Thursday, we decided that we would move the conversation about the Longmont Housing Authority goals to this meeting. And it's been so the draft goals are were in your packet. And it's been a while since we looked at these. The staff has taken some opportunity to add a little more information to the goals, putting together some objectives and action steps and some desired outcomes and outputs. That is still certainly in a, we will continue to refine those. So we wanted to take the opportunity to discuss the goals as we have them drafted right now, get additional comments from our commissioners, and then come back with a revised, with any revisions to basically have the Board of Commissioners approve. So I'm just going to hit the highlights of these and And then if there are questions or there are comments from the commissioners, we would love to have those. So the kind of the first overarching goal is that you see in your packet there is really to make sure that the core focus areas of the Longmont Housing Authority, which is really managing our voucher program, developing affordable rental housing for our lowest income households in Longmont, and managing our properties, to make sure that our work in those areas for the next 5 years are basically reflected in housing needs and demographic and housing types information, so that we wanted to make sure we had data, the most updated data about trends, about demographics, what's really needed, that basically informs the work that we do in those core areas of the Longmont Housing Authority. And so we did submit, staff did submit a grant to the Department of Local Affairs. That grant was funded. I believe we accepted that at the last council meeting, and we will be moving forward with the housing needs assessment that is funded through DOLA. We probably will not need to pursue additional funding opportunities, since we were able to get that DOLA grant, and we'll be coming back with the housing assessment that we will be completing. So I'll just stop after that section and see if there are any comments about from the commissioners about that particular goal area.
As well, Mayor Peck, we are at the 4-minute and 30-second mark. Currently, there are no callers.
Thank you, Dallas. Let's take this down so I can see everybody then. Thank you. Do I have, I'm sorry, do the counselors have any comments or questions for Karen at this point? Doesn't look like it. Whoops, Councilor Martin. I'm sorry, Councilor Waters.
She's the one with hair. Karen and Harold, how do you want to approach this? Just so the other council members know, because I missed the meeting, I was not going to be able to attend the meeting last Thursday. As I looked at that enclosure in those materials, knowing I wasn't going to attend, I provided some written feedback to Karen and Harold. So you have my comments or concerns, recommendations. Are those, how do you want to approach this? You want to, I'm certain you don't want to wordsmith stuff. I mean, I've already submitted my thoughts. Should we just leave it at that and you can do with it what you want? And then we'll decide in a subsequent draft of these how to vote on that. I mean, I'd like to help. I'd like to contribute.
Yeah.
I don't want to waste time, but I do have some expectations that I want to make certain we at least have a chance to address or discuss if we're not going to address them.
So if I can, go ahead.
Well, just to kind of make a statement about that, I would be curious as to what that was. I would like to hear what your comments were, so that if we, I don't know, would you have a problem with that, Commissioner Waters?
No,
Okay. Is there a way to summarize really fast what those comments were?
Well, so let me make just a couple of general observations, and I'll give you an example or two. Let me just first say, I think all the work that the staff is doing on this is important work. In fact, I think the most important decision that we will make as a commission this year, and maybe for the next 2 years, are these goals and objectives. Number one. I mean, the rest of its operations, we'll get asked for some policy reactions or reactions to policy proposals. But I think this is the biggest, most important decision we'll make. What do we expect the housing authority to accomplish from the get-go? Number one. Number two, just in terms of the sequencing of this, I think the last one that's listed, the goal regarding residential life ought to be at the top of the list, just in terms of a statement and messaging to our residents. And I'll get to what might be a more substantive or a way to frame that. But as I went through the language, some of what were offered as goals, I look at it and go, that's a good goal statement. Others, I can't make it out as a goal statement, just as I look at words on a paper and think, what is a good goal statement? And so maybe at some point we ought to have some agreement on what are the components of a good goal statement. But the first one, the overarching goal, there's a lot of words there that I think mean ensuring the Longmont Housing Authority's core focus areas, and that would parenthetical voucher management, affordable renter housing, development, property management, close paren, reflect housing needs based on demographic and housing types. I think the words on the left translate into a simple sentence on the right that I think is clearer and is an actual, it's not time bound and measurable. There are some objectives that go with that, but I think is a legitimate goal statement. From that, I would, if I look at the objective, complete housing needs assessment by the end of 2022, that looks to me more like a task. The objective would be to deliver a report on anticipated housing needs based on demographic and trend data. If I go down to the outputs and outcomes, the planning a grant application submitted to DOLA, that's an output. An outcome would be LHA's development priorities, development plan, and development schedule will result in housing stock that accommodates changing demographics. That would be an outcome. So, I'll just stop at that point. As I went down, some of them it's a mix. Some of them are like spot on goal statements, and others is like, I look at it and think that's not a goal statement at all, but here would be a goal statement. I think that intends is stating what we'd like to state with the goal. Anyway, it's a mix of things, Chairwoman Peck. And so I can go on, but you don't want me to
No.
just drone
Yeah.
on.
I understand what you're saying, but it sounds to me it isn't what the statements are saying. It is dividing dividing them. What are actual goals? What are tasks? What are
It's just being clear on what's a goal, what's an objective, what's an output, what's an outcome, and just be consistent with that. And at this point, when there's a couple of them where we couldn't, and I'm certain that just was a matter of time, just kind of ran out of time in terms of stating what the intended outcome is. And when we can't state an intended outcome, it's like, well, if we don't know what the outcome is, we're not very clear on what the goal is. So I would like to see intended outcomes, preferred outcomes with goal statements. Otherwise, I don't think we have a goal.
So, Karen, I understand what Commissioner Waters is saying, but I look at it just a little bit different in that the goals, if we set the goals, then I think that the commissioners should be in the conversation as to what is the outcome. Does that make sense? That should be a discussion. Here are the goals. What do we expect the outcome to be? Where do we want to go with that? And that would be a discussion that would be interesting to have. So, but so far, I think everything you stated is good. I guess it's just the way you're putting it together. Commissioner Martin.
Chair Peck. I think that differentiating goals from other components of a requirements flow down process is pretty important because I'm thinking of the process that we went through at last year's retreat, and I felt that we had set some, what I would say were objectives in terms of deliverables, that we were going to build certain properties, and none of those properties have been begun, with the exception of the Chrisman one, which was but the authority has not taken any steps to what you're shaking your head.
Finish your statement and then we'll let Harold.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So what my point was, because I know there's things that I may not know about that are going on but have not been brought before this body, but because what we don't have is any ability to break the thing down and see what our deliverables are and what our expectations are for this year. And if we don't have anything but we want to understand the demographic needs by the end of 2022, does that mean that we're not going to make any forward progress on actually creating housing for the entire year? And I don't want to discuss that now because we're talking about goals and objectives. What I want to discuss is can we get these statements laid out in such a way that we do know what our expectations are about that? Because based on last year, I feel like we do know some objectives without knowing the demographics, because they're so far below the bar of what our actual needs are that we can feel safe in proceeding with them. And that's why I think we need, rather than listing things that are, well, they're all activities the housing authority needs to undertake, but they don't specifically define what needs to be attained in this year. And I would like to feel better about knowing what we expect to attain in this year.
Thank you, Commissioner Martin. Harold, do you want to weigh in on that?
So I think some of those get fleshed out as we're digging in later in the document. When we specifically talk about the housing choice vouchers and what we're planning to do, the rental housing development that we're planning to do, which is later in that document. And we work through Sunset Heights, 55 permanent supportive housing, Crispin 2, 49, overdevelopment 30. And so we can talk about that specific. I think that's what you're getting at, but that's in a later section of this document.
And Harold, with those developments, is there a timeline that they will be completed? I think that's what we were, that's the way I interpreted what Commissioner Martin was getting at. What are our accomplishments and when will they be completed? Which
so
are your goals?
Yeah, we can get to that section. And when we say establish and implement a plan to develop 6 new affordable housing communities within the next 3 years, that's where we're specifically talking about that section.
Okay, thank you.
So we say 6 in 3 years.
Okay. Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair Peck. Well, I will admit and agree that the document in and of itself is not perfect, if you will. I think it does outline a number of actionable items that we can move forward with that I think the Housing Authority can agree, at least us as commissioners can agree, would be the most likely and most actionable items. So I would like to see us continue to move forward regardless of the imperfections of the document, such as the director, the acting director of the Housing Authority has pointed out, and to continue working on the document to make it a more perfect document that does adequately outline goals, objectives, actionable items, be it, outcomes versus, goals. So anyway, my point being is that I think we should move forward while trying to still perfect the document. and not consider these things reliant on one another to make action happen. So that's where I stand on it. As far as, because I really, regardless, like I said, of the fact that there may be things that are maybe mislabeled or misappropriated in the document, I think the document in and of itself outlines the great need that we have in the city of Longmont and the steps forward that are likely necessary in the immediate. And I think that's what's most important, is the immediate steps that we can take.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Martin.
Yeah, I actually concur with that. I don't think I was very clear, but what I wanted, I was concerned about creating too many dependencies rather than not enough, that we don't, certain things that are inarguably necessary to become roadblocks, in particular, the demographic study.
Yeah, and to that point on this one, we're not letting that slow us down on the construction side because the gap's too great. And this is really informing what we need to look at in the future as part of that. And if council remember, it's not only affordable, it's also attainable that we're going to be looking at in part of this study as well.
Absolutely. So, Karen, you did a great job.
So
to sum it all up.
Yeah, well, let me comment if that's all right.
Sure.
So certainly I appreciate the input that we received from Councilmember Waters, and I've already made revisions. I didn't include in the packet. At this point, I figured we will look at additional comments or revisions we get from the commissioners. And it sounds like, if I can clarify, that it would be helpful to break down where we can some specific target milestones in terms of years. So this is set up as a 5-year plan. And the only area where we have some years attached to it is really when we'll be targeting some of the initiating some of the developments or the resyndication of some of the properties. And those, so we do have some specific target years for tackling those development projects and rehab projects. But it sounds like it would also be helpful that we attach some milestones to some of these other areas, so that you kind of know when we're going to be when we're going to be tackling those. And I think as our interim executive director talked about, we are moving forward with a lot of these already. And but
Yeah.
I appreciate we're refining in terms of clarity around goals and outcomes and objectives. And so that was helpful. We'll continue to work on that, and we certainly can add some milestones where there aren't any. And I guess the other thing, there are a couple of areas for sure that Commissioner Waters talked about that we have not, we don't know what the outcomes are going to be. We're doing some more research on those. So it doesn't mean that those are not important, but we feel like we needed to do some additional research to help inform what's possible and what could be the outcomes. So we certainly plan to add outcomes in a couple of those areas, but we're still gathering some data to help us define that.
Great. So that was a good discussion, I think.
Do you want us to go over the other components on this? So
Sure. I do.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay. Karen, do you want to take the housing choice voucher, or do you want to go over that and I'll jump in, or how do you want to do this?
I will take the housing choice voucher program. So basically, I'm reading off my revised document that I took Commissioner Waters' input. So this area, this goal is really to increase the access to rental assistance for Longmont households with low and moderate incomes. And so the direction that we received from the commissioners back in July was to look at how we increase those vouchers by 10% year over year. We wanted an aspirational target. And so we included that in the document. And there's a couple of things that that obviously we are working on now, which is how to perfect our understanding and use of the 2-year planning tool that HUD makes available for housing authorities, to make sure that we are optimizing the amount of vouchers that we can issue with the budget authority that we have, which is right now it's 5.4 million is the allocation we get from HUD. And we have to use that 2-year tool to be able to help define how many vouchers we can issue with that. We call it our sweet spot, but that is really our guiding document to make sure that we are staying on top, that we are spending our 5.4 million and we're not overspending it. And so that's really the key for us. So right now, kind of an update is we thought we have authority to issue up to 513 vouchers, but we don't have enough budget to be able to do that. So 420 was our target vouchers, but it looks like we like last week, we basically moved that up to 439. So we're continuing to use that tool so that we can optimize the amount of vouchers that we issue. And right now we are looking at issuing up to 439 vouchers with that 5.4 million.
And I want to explain that change a little bit to you all, because this one, you're dependent on other variables. And so obviously we talk about the 2-year tool, we targeted 420, not based on what we're authorized, but based on dollar amount. And part of that is we have to maintain a 2% reserve. And the reason that 2% reserve, and that's really important into this conversation, is because that's to handle rental increases that occur. And so if you see the rental market move up on you, that reserve is there so that you don't take someone who has a voucher and then you're having to remove a voucher because you don't have enough money. So that's an external factor that actually impacts how many we have. What Karen was talking about is the move to 439 vouchers. We learned that there's another external factor that impacts this, and was it Medicaid or Medicare, or so what was it that
we got an increase in basically Medicare, I think.
So there was a Medicare increase that occurred that actually flowed its way down into our financial analysis that then allowed us to actually issue more. And I think is Kendra on with us or no?
She is.
Kendra can explain it in more detail, but basically what it did is it gave us more capacity. And so as we're learning through this voucher world, there are variables that are even outside of our control that can actually take you up and take you down.
I think actually it was Social Security.
Was it Social Security?
Yeah. Yeah.
So can I just ask a question? Well, Kendra's probably going to explain it. I don't understand. So the increase in Medicare was to
Social Security.
So it was
I'm
Social Security, Commissioner.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Was to the residents?
Yeah.
So they didn't need, okay, go ahead, Kendra. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the residents, there was a release where Social Security was going to be higher. So as people are getting recertified, they're having to pay more of a tenant portion. So that releases more HAP for us to release vouchers.
Okay.
So that's something we monitor so I wasn't seeing the average rental rate go up. That's what I was expecting to see, to go up, because we raised the fair market rent to 100%. So I should start seeing that our average monthly rental goes up, but it wasn't. So that's when Ruby said, well, they got more Social Security. There was a release. And so we're seeing that go down so we can release more vouchers.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for that clarity.
So I wanted to use that as an example of that's moving.
Mhm.
And that was just an important learning lesson from us that we found out, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair Peck. So my question is related to people that are awarded vouchers here for the city of Longmont and then use those vouchers in different municipalities. As that happens, is there a reaccounting year by year, or do we continue to hold those vouchers as part of our portfolio, even though they may be in, say, Netherlands?
So there's two things. So we have people that port in to the Longmont, and we can either absorb them into our voucher program or they stay as a port in. And we have people that leave our voucher program and go to another housing authority, and that's a port out. So we keep them as a port out within our structure until that housing authority absorbs them. If they absorb them, then it opens up a voucher on our end that we can release. But it's all dependent upon their funding as well, if they can absorb us. We have probably about 7 that are ported in to ours, and we have not absorbed them yet because we wanted to be able to issue that to voucher holders within our wait list that we just did. So.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering how that affects the numbers.
Yeah, it's all rooted in the total dollar amount. And so some housing authorities that have a lot of capacity routinely take them in. Housing authorities that don't have the capacity, you tend to let the people get housed and house other individuals.
So I don't know if there are any other questions about the housing choice voucher section.
I don't see any. It's very complicated for my mind.
And just so you know, we're going to do some things. We're going to work to update our housing page as well to make that more clear.
Oh, good.
And part of that was, so when we opened it up, we had 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
We narrowed that down to 150
Wow.
because we obviously couldn't house the full 1,000. But then of the 150, when we look at the vouchers, the only thing that we really had available was what was left to 420 and then the additional amount, correct, Kendra? And so that really gives you a sense of the demand and what you actually have available.
Yeah, the other thing we noticed this year that we weren't really taking advantage of is that we might release 20, but then all of a sudden we have 10 end of participation. So we worked it into our process that if we have an end of participation, that's an automatic release of voucher. Get another voucher out there because that's, so we were never getting above the limit because we were having end of participations the same time we were issuing vouchers and not reissuing on top of that. So that's definitely something we learned in the process, and we've upgraded our processes in that.
Wow. Interesting. So, Karen, do you have any more on this subject for us?
No, I don't think so. I think, we certainly understand the commissioner's urging is to continue to grow the rental assistance vouchers, and certainly our focus in this last year or so has been really to optimize and get as many vouchers out there with the funding authority that we have, so that when HUD releases an opportunity for more funding, that we are in a good position to be able to go after that and be awarded more dollars from HUD, so that we would be able to issue more rental assistance vouchers for households in our community.
Great, good job.
So I think the rental housing development, Harold, do you want to take that?
Yeah,
You
so
and Molly?
what the council said is implement a plan to develop 6 new affordable housing communities within the next 3 years. You can see the objectives in terms of what we're doing. The action steps are really associated with what we brought to you all as part of the ARPA funding. And so invest 1.3 million in Sunset Heights permanent supportive housing development, 800,000 in Chrisman 2, develop LHA owned Hover property for family focused affordable housing of 1.3 million, invest 1.7 million for seed money to do the public private partnership for affordable assisted living, 1.5 million affordable rental housing that we'll manage as part of a mixed income, mixed rental that's associated with the Costco property. That's already been expended. We've purchased that property. And then 3 million to purchase a remnant parcel with the Royal Mobile Home, and we're getting ready to act on that. And so what I want to talk about a little bit in this, as you can see, in terms of the outputs and the outcomes. So the 1.3 million in Sunset Heights, that, as we talked about before, was really there based on what happens with the tax credits and the 9% competitive tax credits and what we need. And that we're still in that tax credit component with Element Properties and the state and CHAFA. And right now, today, well, over the last few days, there's been a barrage of questions that Karen and I still need to connect on in terms of that project. And so I don't know, Karen, if you have any more recent updates on that issue, other than we're knee deep in the finance component or the tax credit process right now on that project.
And most of the follow-up questions from the Division of Housing are really about how to pay for the tenant support services that are a big component of the permanent supportive housing development. So we are working through those questions and preparing responses to the Division of Housing.
And so I think when I was nodding my head earlier when Councilmember Martin said that, what I was really getting at in this is, so Element Properties has come in, they've done what I would say is preliminary design. They're digging deeper into the design process of that facility, but they're also having to lag that a little bit because of the financing component of this. And what I mean by that is, if you don't get the tax credits, then the deal can't go forward, which is why we allocated this money. And I'm looking at Molly, because if for some reason it doesn't happen, we take this and then try to bridge the capital stack with this money so that it could function as a 9% project if we had to go in the 4% non-competitive tax credit piece with this. And so to give you a sense of how long this takes, we submitted this application in the first round last year for the tax credits, the 9%. We weren't awarded the 9%. So then we had to wait to the next round, which was February, what was the date, Molly? February 1. So we submitted into February 1. They're still moving through that. We're having to answer all of these questions, but everything then starts stalling out as you're moving through this this component on the tax credit side. And it's really dependent on them in terms of whether or not you get it. And everyone gets real hesitant in terms of where you move until you get certainty on the tax credit side. So that's really in terms of Sunset Heights. That's what we're waiting on, is to get an answer on the tax credit side. And then depending on what that answer is, then we have to then scramble pretty fast to figure out, if it's not the answer we're hoping for, then we've got to bridge a financial gap in this project to see if it'll even work. So, and in the time sink on this point, just to give you a sense, is it's a lot of time when you start getting into this level of conversation with them. I think Molly's spending hours upon hours as we do this, and that's just on Sunset Heights. The next one that comes in, as you see, the affordable, the 800,000 with Chrisman. That one's a little bit different because we're going in with a 4% non-competitive tax credits, which we know we got, but then the financials in the capital stack because of everything that we're seeing in inflation increases started flipping on us. And so then we had to figure out, how do you resolve a gap financially? And so two things are happening in that world, is that we're looking at what we have for 800,000, but we're also having to go back to Department of Housing. They agreed to contribute $20,000 a door to that project. Molly, we're asking for what now? 35,000?
32,500.
32,000.
32,500 per door.
So we're asking for an additional $12,000 a door to make that project pencil itself out, figure out what we're bringing to the table, and we're in that conversation as well. In addition to that, that's a 4% project, so that's non-competitive. You're running a parallel track with DOH to get more money per door to help bridge the financial gap, but then you're also working with the lenders who've agreed to invest on this project. And so we just signed the LOI with the lender last week, and now we're moving in with the attorneys in terms of the overall agreement. That one's actually moving a little bit faster, primarily because it was a 4% product. But for the ARPA funds, we probably are we're really stopped waiting on this. But because they were granted the 4% non-competitive tax credits, that gave the developer enough certainty to go into full design and a development review process within the city. So they've been in. And they're, I think, in the second or third round of comments. We didn't have very many the last time. So now we're just waiting on the financials to go through. So it takes probably, I would say, if you really fast track the financial side of this, and this is what we're learning and trying to build a timeline, a good 9 months just on the financial side. To pull all of these things together in the development of these processes. And the more complicated it is, the longer it takes. So you have about a 9-month financial process. Once you can get tax credit information, then the development process moves at a different, it starts moving. And your goal is to, when you're ready to close and do it, the development and the financing has lined up with each other so you can move. And that's probably, I'm looking at Molly, a really overly simplified explanation of how these projects come together. What we're going to try to do is give you all a graphical representation of the different stages and kind of show you where we are in each one of these projects so that you get a sense of what we're dealing with, so you know where we are. And we're just trying to figure that out because we don't want to set the expectations up here when we know in reality we're still here at the ground level trying to get the capital stack pulled together. And so when Molly gets a breather on those two, we've talked about bringing that together. What we're not bringing into the mix in terms of the development of the new houses, the new locations here, is also the resyndications that come in for us. And so we also have a resyndication of, and we probably should add it into this, but resyndication of Village Place, which is essentially the same financial work that you do on the development project, but you're just doing it so you can reinvest capital in it. And so that's going to be going this year as well. And we finished the capital needs on Village Place and on Lodge and Hearthstone for a conversion of the 202 out of that. And so we've got those four going, which is why we're advertising the development and finance position, because that's going to be incredibly important for us to start pulling the trigger on these other projects. And so we're going to get more focused on timelines. But to be quite honest, we're learning our way right now. I mean, we're learning through these projects to get a sense of how long it really takes as we're moving forward.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Just a by suggestion, when you are doing this, could you also provide us with a glossary? For example, use the term 202. I have no idea. And I started my list of organs that I didn't understand too late for the number to be meaningful. But a lot of them went by, and I don't know whether everybody else, but I don't know any of them.
Well, and sometimes we don't either. We learn them through it. But yeah, we definitely need to give you all a glossary on this as we're moving through it. But so I wanted you to know, so our next work on this is really to start allocating timelines and dates, and then give you a very basic version of a Gantt chart in terms of where we are, just so you all know where we're sitting on this, because without just blowing our minds, 3 this year, to hit this 3-year timeline, toward the end of the year, we got to figure out how to layer 2 more in. And then next year, I mean, now we're going to have to start staging these things. And frankly, right now, we're just at capacity issues in terms of getting this work done. And so that's what we got to figure out and get some positions hired.
I really appreciate what you just walked us through, Harold, because it really answers the question is why is it taking so long? Why don't we have anything here? And the steps are amazing, that the hoops you have to jump through to pull it all together. Not only the staff, but the developers as well. You know, it has to all come together, and it's a big job. So thank you so much.
And the reality, if I can give you an example, you're moving this way.
Yeah.
You'll move back on things like inflationary increases on the cost of goods and services. So on Chrisman 2, we thought we were here. The market got out from under us, and we backed up, because then all of a sudden you have to solve for all these issues. And then you move forward, and then something else hits you, and then you move back. And so it's we've got to figure out a way to show all of that movement, because that's important to understand how we're going to develop these with more specificity for you all.
Great, thank you. So is that the end of the report for the 2022-2026 goals?
I think we've got.
Or have we gone way past that?
I think, Chair Peck, so so I'm just going to hit some of the others. So they're the kind of the other areas that we had talked about was really in developing partnerships. And so so those are kind of toward the end of the document. And those are really in the areas of helping to make sure that our older adults that are living in our senior independent living projects or developments, that we are able to enhance the availability of supportive services so that individuals who are in our properties can live there as long as possible before, before needing a long-term or assisted care or long-term care. So what we've outlined in here is what the what the plan would be. We've identified that the supportive services have probably fall into the range of cleaning, home care, and transportation to help with independent living. Our action steps are really to look at what are the various partnerships that we can establish to make those services possible. And again, our hope is that we are able to increase by 5% year over year the number of residents who can access those supportive services. And obviously, we want to lengthen the time that individuals can stay in our LHA properties before they need more care in order to support them. So that is the one area we are also looking at, and this was identified also in our ARPA funds, is really to look at the need for affordable assisted living. So when individuals aren't able to live independently in our properties anymore and need to go to assisted living, that finding affordable assisted living has been a challenge. And so this is really about we're going to do some research with a model that the Loveland Housing Authority has has established, as well as looking at a partnership with True Pace for people who are Medicaid eligible for services. So again, we're looking at how, once people can no longer really be living safely in independent living, how do we have some kind of that continuum with affordable assisted living that would be available for our residents? And so those are kind of and then moving into the next level of partnership was really around one of the commissioners talked about, how do we also look for opportunities for some of our family housing as we bring that on, how to create an opportunity for, either early education centers or after school programs or those kinds of things in as part of those as far as those developments. So we do have on the starting in 2024, I believe, the resyndication of the Aspen Meadow neighborhood, which is our family housing. Might there be an opportunity when we resyndicate and refinance that project to provide more on-site care for our for children who are living there, as well as we look at bringing on new family developments? How do we think about and encourage opportunities or buildings or whatever for early child care and youth development? Boulder Housing Partners has done this pretty successfully in some of their models. And this is an area where we have to be determined. So I know, Commissioner Waters, that we're just not sure what that outcome is going to be. Well, we'll have one. I promise we will have one. But we're still working on the research around that. And then we'll come back when we kind of know what might be possible sooner, that we will be able to add some outcomes to that.
Hey,
And then
Karen.
the
Hey, Karen, I think the same thing it's the same issue on the, really get more specific on the affordable assisted living.
right.
Is it that we, at the end of the day, to the point of the goal, are we going to build a greenhouse similar to what Loveland Housing Authority did? I mean, and that's what we're still trying
Right.
to figure out. And so that will come back because we've got to get more specific on what that's gonna be.
Correct. And that's the same way with the other area that commissioners asked us to look at, was really about how do we establish a pathway to home ownership. So for some of our voucher holders that are paying a pretty large portion of their rent, from their own incomes, and their HAP payment, their housing assistance payment is a smaller amount, they might be ready to transition to market rate rental housing or even home ownership, and or looking at how we strengthen our partnership with Habitat for home ownership opportunities. So again, we're researching. We'll have outcomes, I promise. So, and then also the same thing with our residential, our community development, which again, we heard from Commissioner Waters about, we might want to have that early on in the document rather than at the end. We are moving forward with, we've conducted the individual interviews with around 75 to 80 of our residents that live in all of the various properties that the Housing Authority owns and operates. We, our next step in that process was to take the themes and to go back to the residents through a community conversation and flesh out just what specifically would be some of their priorities and actions they would like to see the Housing Authority take. And then we went back into lockdown for COVID. And so we put a pause on those community conversations, but we're back. We have members of the LHA advisory board that have signed up to help with those community conversations. And again, once we finish those conversations, I would say by by mid-year of this year, we will be able to add some very specific outcomes based on the additional input that we get from the residents. So that's the high level. And And again, I've already, made some revisions based on what we received from Commissioner Waters in terms of really strengthening some of the objectives and goals when they were maybe more squishy. They needed to be strengthened. So we have done that. And whatever, if commissioners have additional input around that, we will, we've taken notes on some things we got here that we received this evening, and we'll continue to flesh out and strengthen those goals and timeframes and milestones.
So I'm going to make a motion that Community Service Director Karen Rohde cannot retire. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
It's amazing the amount of work you do, and it's very exciting in the movement forward.
Yeah.
So
I think we're really excited. And speaking for the staff that are on this call, it's excited to see the work. It's excited to see the focus. We really haven't had that before, and so it represents a lot of hope for a fabulous future, I think, for the Housing Authority and the folks that we are supporting and serving in our community.
I think so too. Thank you.
What we want to see by the end of the year is 2 projects under construction, if not a third resyndication, all at the same time. And I give you I'm just saying that because I've said this to the group. If you would have asked me when we took over the Housing Authority if we would be talking about development of this magnitude, I think I said I would have thought we're crazy. This is a testament to the work that everybody on this and the people that you don't see on this. And what I mean by that is our resident managers, our maintenance staff. They are doing things right now that's freeing capacity up to do these things. And this is a team effort. And when you all will hear me talk about Center of Excellence and things like that, this is one of those that you bring that group together to take these big, hairy, audacious issues and you move pretty fast, or opportunities. Take opportunities and you move fast, and they've done phenomenal work. We know we got more to do to tighten this up, and our commitment is we'll do that for you all. If you have feedback, send it to us via email.
Okay.
And we'll definitely take all of that and we'll bring it back to you. And if I could vote on the mayor's motion, I would love to be able to.
Oh, great. Commissioner Martin.
Yes, thank you, Chair Peck. I just want to say that, frustrations expressed all aside, it is clear the magnitude of work that's been done. And, our frustration, my frustration is because of the magnitude of the need, we have so much to do, and it is 2 steps forward, 1 step back as things change. And so I just want to express appreciation for having developed in less than 2 years, or exactly 2 years, I guess, the level of expertise in the city organization that makes it possible to do this at all. So thank you.
Thanks.
So we have the interim executive director's report. Harold Dominguez is here. What I'm hearing is that it's all kind of morphed into one in this presentation, but the aged receivables report.
I'm gonna ask Kendra and probably Molly and is Lisa.
Then Lisa.
I'm gonna ask Kendra to jump on and talk about the age receivable and the monthly financials quickly, And
Okay.
Lisa to talk about the vacancy report and the property updates.
So when we started this journey a while ago, we started an AR balance of about $139,000, of which there was about 52,000 that was in prepayment or HAP suspense with community managers, assistants, and my graded accounting team, along with some write-offs that we had to do in December. You know, we've brought it down to a balance of 33,000 and only 20,000 in that prepaid. So, I mean, we've made great strides in getting the AR cleaned up, and we're in a much better cash situation than we were back in the day. So, and that's like a full team effort. You know, the reason we're in a better cash situation is, you know, HCV realized we could go up to the fair market rent on these PBV units and the HCV units to bring more money into these properties to help assist with capital needs assessments and repairs. We also had, you know, Lisa on board, who knew so much about property management, and how to and how to utilize those tools for those properties to make the best of their dollars. So, you know, we should be able to do some of these repairs on our own and without getting a third party involved. So we're in a much better cash situation with just that. Anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 more in cash than we were at 2020, at the end of 2020. So it's been great to see the strides that all of them are making, you know, from community managers to the HCV staff, to the leaders on board here. So if anybody has any questions regarding any of the financials, most of it's it's still in audit play right now. Most of the properties have to have their audits completed by February 15th. So I think we've reached that goal, and some of them have been finalized. There's a few out there still, and those are the ones that pretty much just got finalized. But we'll start the LHDC audit and the LHA audit here soon.
Have any questions for Kendra? No, it looks great. So Lisa, vacancy and property reports, property updates.
Good evening. So for the occupancy, I'm just happy to and excited to state for the first time since I've been here, we've reached 97% at the end of January. So we're moving up. I positive that's going to continue into this month, well, February that we just closed. Not too much going on. We have a couple wait lists open right now. As of the first, we had the 202 properties, which are HUD 62 and over properties that are subsidized. Those wait lists open today, and they're open today and tomorrow. There is no maximum amount of numbers. Households do have to be over 62 to be put on that wait list, though. And we also have Village Place waitlist open and Spring Creek's waitlist open as well, currently. We do have a few units down still due to meth. We believe the one at the neighborhood will be back online by hopefully April 1st. It's in its final cleaning and should be good to go. We are working with our insurance agent to get the suites one back on board. And not too much more around occupancy, but any questions based on the report you guys received?
Do you have any questions? I do want to know, Lisa, how many people are on the waiting lists now?
Each waiting list varies. We have a waiting list per property for all of our senior properties, a separate one for the suites, separate one for Village Place, separate one for 202, because each project is so different, and it's some people may not want Main Street location like for Village Place, but they want over on Homestead Parkway. So each community maintains their own, and those wait lists could be anywhere from 30 to 60 people. Once we hit a good number, then we'll close the wait list.
When you close them, I would be curious, and maybe some of the other commissioners would as well, as to how many people are on those wait lists, just to get a feel for our community and how many people are in need, even though we're helping a lot. how many people are out there. So just going forward.
Okay, so when we close these next 4 that are open, I will bring to the next meeting
Great.
what we
Thanks.
close those with. Okay, I'll move on to the property updates. I don't want to bore you too much, but as Karen stated before, we did have a successful HCV waitlist opening. We had over 1,000 people apply for the 150 spots. We've brought on a new maintenance tech. Let's see. We do have a conditional offer out for a housing choice voucher specialist. He is supposed to be starting March 7th. So that will be growing the HCV team. A few great points to point out for Aspen Meadows neighborhood. CHAFA, the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, did approve us for an employee unit on site. So we will have a manager moving in to help keep eyes and ears on site after hours and help with that neighborhood and making sure everything's going smoothly even after hours. The Briarwood, that we've had 2 units. This isn't on your sheet, but we've had 2 units held for the city funded voucher program. Both households moved in today. So Briarwood is now 100% occupied. Aspen Meadows Senior has also reached 100% occupied. We still have a couple of spots open. We are still looking for a custodian. We're looking for another maintenance position.
Okay.
The other thing is, Briarwood has historically not been part of the crime-free multifamily housing program. And when I talked earlier about the work with Sarah, Sarah's part of the team as well. And so Lisa has been working with Sarah to make Briarwood part of the crime-free multifamily housing program. So at this point, all of our properties will be part of that program.
Correct. Briarwood was just inspected last Thursday.
Lisa, what is the acronym HCV? What is that?
Housing choice voucher.
Oh, of course. Okay. I should know that.
So the only, if there's no questions for Lisa, so the only other update that I wanted to give you is you all may remember that the Longmont Housing Development Corporation, excuse me, and decided that they wanted to dissolve. And so we're in the middle of untangling all of that at the moment. As you all know, Aspen Meadow Apartments, we actually did that through the resyndication on that property. We are part of the HUD 202 transfer is also to transfer that from Longmont Housing Development Corporation to the Longmont Housing Authority. And then I'm trying to think what's left, Molly. Help me on this one. The 2 biggest that we need to work on, Spring Creek and Fall River, and that's because they're so early in the process that we have to go through and work with the lenders and other folks to get that converted over to the housing authority. And that's going to take a fair amount of time, I think, to move through that process, but not what we initially thought. There's a fair amount of untangling that's going to have to occur on Chrisman 1. Chrisman 2 is being brought into the LHA portfolio. We have to untangle Chrisman 1. And what we didn't talk about is when you finance these, you get into C Corps and other things in order to make the tax credits work. So we have to start shifting all of that. So we have a team of our accountants, a lawyer, Ben Doyle, and Sarah Batt, all working with us right now as we're converting that over into the housing authority. And at the end of the day, what that also will do is strengthen our financial position as a whole. And as we move in the development, I think it streamlines the process. Right now, what we're working through on that is really to understand the CHODO component to this, which is a community housing development organization, and how we want to see if that can fit in play here, because we can't be a CHODO. And so we're going to have to figure that out. CHODOs actually went down because there wasn't a lot of money for them. And what we're hearing is there may be more money. So we're trying to understand that as we untangle the Longmont Housing Development Corporation and bring it in. So you all will probably start seeing that hit you probably within 3 or 4 months, Molly?
Yep. So our first steps are to, based on our input from our tax auditor and the attorneys, fine tune the priority list of which properties we have to start first, which ones will be easy to pick off, which we need to start first because they'll take longer, which, as you mentioned, Crispin 1 is high on that list for that reason. So yes, we're working on a schedule and step-by-step process for each of these to outline it and know what each will require and the timelines associated.
And the thing that we have to be really careful on is the tax liabilities involved in this, because one misstep can create hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax liabilities. And so it is be really measured as you're moving through this. And we're all learning tax law now for affordable housing. Any questions about the LHDC move?
You answered mine. I was going to ask you, how do you get developers for these properties? Do you put out an RFP? But the Chodo, I guess is what you said.
So it's a different question depending on what it is, and you can do an RFP. Sometimes there are developers that are very specific to this type of affordable housing, and so sometimes they'll come to you. That's actually what happened with Crispin. And so it depends on what you're looking at, but I will tell you, what you do look for is somebody that understands the world of tax credits and CHFA and DOH, because if you don't have that experience, it can be a tough road. And MGL, who we're working with on Crispin 2, they're really strong in that arena, and I think that's what's helped us keep this project moving forward and frankly in play, to be honest with you. They've done a lot of work, and so we really look for expertise on the development side in this arena, and how they can move through it.
Interesting, a lot of work. So is there anything else, Harold, that you want to bring to us? That's about it.
That's it for today.
It's a lot. It's a lot. You do great work. So since we're done with those presentations, I want to know if we have any commissioners' comments before we end the meeting. Commissioner Waters.
Thanks, Chairperson Peck. Harold, I chatted with you briefly a few days ago about parking at the Village Place. I understand this is not a policy question. This is an operations issue, but I don't know if others, council members / commissioners have had questions about parking at Village Place. If you haven't, my guess you will. It would be helpful if we could just publicly to clarify where are we and where are we headed with parking at Village Place? What can residents count on in terms of their need to or not to compete for parking spaces? And is there just something we could get a few sentences that we could be consistent in our responses when we get questions from residents about parking at Village Place?
Yeah, so first on the response, Molly and Lisa, since our conversation, has provided me with since your question based on the call you received, they provided me with something. I need to get with them. There's a couple of points I want to look at in that, and we will get that to you within the next day or so.
Okay.
I think, so there's a lot of things happening right now in parking. We know we have parking issues at Village Place because of its proximity to downtown. They do have people that park in that location. They have assigned spaces. What we're looking at doing is and this is not, so the parking issue's all over. So let's start there. So we're partnering with a tow company, and we're going to be putting signs up, and they will be working with us to monitor locations to ensure that the residents who live in the properties actually have the parking spaces, that they're the ones parking in those locations. Molly, Lisa, you're going to have to help me on this one. So that's how the conversation started. We also then began, Village Place, as I said, has assigned parking. And as we look at the monitoring in these components, operationally, I think it becomes more difficult with the assigned spots. The other thing that we saw in Village Place is that they actually assign handicap spots to people, and you can't do that by law. And so there's a legal issue that we have to deal with on those spots. But generally, I think there was some understanding that they were going to have to compete with parking for the DDA in the Village Place parking lot, and that's not the intent of this. The intent of this is to ensure that there are parking spots for people who live in those locations. Lisa also told them that this is not something we're doing today. It'll be, I think, 6 months is what you talked about based on what we're able to do. And so we were trying to have that conversation with them ahead of time. Now, all that being said, we talked about the resyndication of Village Place, and we know when we do that, we're going to have construction. We're going to need to have a place to stage construction, and we will be actively engaging in conversations with the residents of Village Place as we move into that area. And so that's a quick update on that, but we'll give you all the specifics in that email. Did I?
Thank you.
Lisa, Molly?
Yep, but you covered it well.
Thanks.
Thank you. So are there any other comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I think that we need a motion to adjourn this meeting. I move to adjourn. Can I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Martin and Commissioner Waters. So all those in favor of adjourning, raise your hand. Thank you. This was a really good meeting. You gave us a lot of information, good information. Thank you. We are adjourned.